Welcome to Talk Advocacy to Me, the podcast that dives deep into the world of customer advocacy and loyalty. I'm your host, Liz Richardson, and I'm joined by my dynamic co-host, Deena Zenyk. We're the co-founders of Captivate Collective, and we're here to spark your curiosity and fuel your passion for all things customer advocacy. Each episode, we tackle hot and pressing customer engagement topics for the advocurious to the seasoned pro. So let's dive in and talk advocacy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Advocacy to Me, where we talk about one question in the field of customer marketing and advocacy and dive in. I'm Liz Richardson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Captivate Collective. As always, I have my co-host and co-founder, Deena Zenyk, the Chief Customer Officer of Captivate Collective. And I'm so excited to introduce our topic today, which is why are customer advisory boards your high stakes play, which then leads me to introduce our guest today, which is exciting for us because we have Elizabeth Gordon Hammersley here. She is a customer advocacy consultant, and she's kind of new to the Captivate team, which is why we're so excited to have her here as a guest with us on our podcast today. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today. I can't wait to chat about one of my favorite things, customer advisory.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Elizabeth, we know you love customer advisory boards. So we're going to get into that. First, let's make sure that our audience knows a little bit about you since you are going to be our guest today talking with us. So Elizabeth, you have recently come from IntroHive, where you were the manager of customer advocacy over there. Customer marketing and advocacy, excuse me. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you love this topic so much.
Yeah, so my name is Elizabeth. It's great to meet everybody today, or thank you for joining. I am based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, over here in Canada on the East Coast, and I've been working in customer marketing and advocacy for, I would say, just about 4 years now. Now, all that to say, I know that a lot of people kind of stumble into this, and I will say kind of the work that I was doing even before it was technically kind of named or coined that was very customer driven, very advocacy driven. So I worked with IntroHive for about 3.5 years and stood up their customer marketing kind of arm of the business. And I was really fortunate to have a really supportive team, a leadership team that really believed in customer marketing and advocacy. And therefore, I was able to do a lot of really cool, fun projects, customer advisory boards being one.
Awesome. Wonderful. We're so excited to be here. I am a little distracted because I see people are saying it's a little hard to see and maybe hear me. So that's okay. That's why there's two of us, so that Deena can jump in and make sure that you guys get a better picture and a better audio here. So Deena, feel free to kind of take it away and I'll work with Alicia on fixing it up.
You know, Liz, like everyone wants to see you in like HD, right? Obviously. No one wants to tune in and see blurry Liz or hear, weird voice Liz. Everyone wants to see you and hear you perfectly. So I will jump into the driver's seat here. Oh, can I call myself the host? Not just the co-host, just actually the host today. Elizabeth, thank you for that background. And thank you so much for choosing to join Team Captivate. It's wonderful to have you here with us, and our clients are loving working with you. So great job. So let's get into some chat here around customer advisory boards and what makes them such a high stakes initiative. So Elizabeth, why do you think folks should be prioritizing CABs, as we'll probably refer to them here in the next half an hour, in their pack of customer programs?
Yeah, great question. And so, it is a bit of a hot take, but I do believe that customer advisory boards are really, for me anyway, were the crown jewel of all of my customer programs. It's what I used to refer to it as. It's what we referred to it as in IntroHive terms. Because customer advisory boards are really that white glove experience that you want to be offering your customers. Your customers are highly influential. They're very strategic. They are time poor. So for you to ask,
I like that phrase, time poor.
Yeah, right? They're very time poor.
Yeah.
And they're being asked to do 1,000 things. They're being pulled in a lot of different directions, right? And so to ask them to join an initiative that, when you think about it, it's not transactional. It's not that transactional thing where it's saying, hey, can you leave us a review? We'll give you a gift card or something that's an easy, low hanging fruit activity. It's something where you truly put on your advocacy mindset and you nurture. These are relationships that you're going to nurture for the long haul. You're asking people to really invest 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer with the company. And they are going to give you their experience, their thoughts. They're going to share quite openly kind of how they feel about you and your product and your service, and ways that you can improve or lean into. And so there's a rawness and a vulnerability there in a customer advisory board, which I believe makes it high stakes. But there's also a lot of pressure to make sure that you're delivering on everything that comes with a customer advisory board. You're asking for a lot, so you want to make sure that you're following through. And so I do believe that it is kind of that higher echelon. That's the white glove experience that you can really offer your customer. So I often call it the crown jewel, as mentioned.
Did customer advisory boards have to be boring? Can I just ask that?
Oh my gosh, no. I actually was going to say a little bit further down, chemistry on a customer advisory board is...
Oh, it's just the two of us. Liz is gone. We can talk about her now.
Hopefully she returns, but hopefully it didn't scare her off. But I think that customer advisory boards, they are seen as like looming and scary and massive projects, right?
Yeah.
And they can be intimidating to kick off because they require a lot of alignment. They require a lot of energy and time and care. But when you're picking members, you want to make sure that the chemistry amongst your members is really important because, to your point, you want it to be fun. If people are investing time, it better be fun,
Yeah. I think that too. I think just because people are successful and they're executives doesn't mean they're boring or don't want to have don't want to learn and share and network in an environment that is not completely, vanilla and boring. All right. I like this hot take, Elizabeth. Let's keep going here. What are the key risks or challenges that could cause a cab to fail? And how can marketers avoid them? No one wants to fail.
No one wants to fail. I mean, you learn. I call these areas of opportunities rather than challenges.
Yeah.
Try to put a nice little twist on it. But there are a lot of risks, as we've already mentioned a couple of them, and there are some challenges. And the way to kind of mitigate any of those would be, first and foremost, like make sure you have alignment from the highest of high leadership. I'm talking CEO, CPO. I remember at IntroHive, I actually worked with two different cohorts of leadership. So during my 3.5 years there was some change in leadership. And the first group of leadership that I worked with was really keen on launching a customer advisory board, and so was I. But I always try to listen to my gut and think, am I doing it to do it, or am I doing it with intention and thoughtfulness? And when we started talking about how this would actually come to fruition and what the actual background work is in a customer advisory board, I actually had to go to them and say, I don't think we're ready. And that's really hard, right? Like you get nervous to say that to leadership, but I had to trust my gut, and they agreed. We weren't ready at that time to launch something like a customer advisory board. But with the second round of leadership that I was working with, they did have the capacity at the time, a year later, to be able to really, truly dig in and support something like a customer advisory board. And so having that alignment from top down, I swear will save you so many headaches and so many pains in trying to get people to actually action some of that feedback that you're getting from your members. And accountability. So just a really nice kind of like play with what I just talked about with alignment is everybody understanding like what their role is. So not just being a part of it, being excited to be a part of it and show up and, speak or present, but also do the hard work when you're done and when you leave the meetings. So that's really, really important. And accountability and transparency is really, really key.
I'm going to ask you something, just totally your personal opinion. Not a best practice, but just in your opinion, Are cabs better when those, so you've talked about executives and having that executive alignment. Are
Mhm.
cabs better when your executives actually participate in the cab, or can you get away with running a cab for customer executives without having your executives represented at the event?
So great question. You know what, and there's a lot of different opinion on this, so I'm
There
very curious.
is. That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah. So my hot take on it is when you're thinking about the people that you're asking to come and join this program, you want to be thinking about the people that are going to be in the room with them and the access that they're going to have to, yes, other members, but also the executive team. Because in my opinion, if you bring execs to the table, it shows that there's a lot of care and a lot of thought. And there's likely going to be a lot of action taken. And it's being taken seriously, I think. It kind of gives that perception and acknowledgement and access that I think a lot of executives and other companies are looking for, because
Mm.
they have great, hopefully, great relationships with their CS organization. They have great relationships with the account management and things like that, but they don't often have the access that a cab really provides to that executive level leadership in the company.
Hmm.
So I think it's
Yeah.
pretty key. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for those folks, just to kind of finish up on that point, folks who um, sometimes do have trouble getting their own executives
Mhm.
to participate in this style of event, maybe just the value of them being there hasn't been communicated in the right way yet, because it is like, I see cabs totally as it's the total two-way street, a mutual exchange of value.
Yes.
You should be delivering a ton of value to your customers at these events and also learning a bunch
Yeah.
from your customers, but also just developing that relationship with them in that knowledge
Yeah.
exchange. Okay. Um, I'm going to move on to another question for you here, Elizabeth. A practical one now. What are some practical steps or tips you recommend to create a successful cab that drives that mutually beneficial value that I just mentioned?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, there's a few things that I've already mentioned that I think are really key for building the foundation of a really wonderful customer advisory board. But you have to have a shared vision and shared understanding of what the
Hmm.
outcomes are going to be, both internally and externally. So when you're creating a customer advisory board, you want to be creating a charter for the board. And so that's to be shared externally with members and then internally. So everyone understands why you're there. What's your mission? What's your purpose?
Hmm.
And what are the outcomes to be expected and the benefits for both parties, right? And so that's really, really important. And that's kind of when you're taking off. That is just something that is absolutely required, I would say. And then once you get rolling and you get knowing your members, one of the greatest things that you can do is, a cab for me is like 80% listening, 20% doing,
Hmm.
at least in the meetings and in the interactions and things like that. And so you really want to hone in on your members' strengths and their areas of interest. And from the cab, one of the great things about it is that you can then identify and really hone in on their interests and their passions and find advocacy activities that help bolster an opportunity for them to build their personal brand, build the brand of the
Hmm.
company. So yeah. And then the other thing I would say, honestly, is don't overthink it. Because as we mentioned, cabs can be seen as very looming large projects. And sometimes we overthink things. And I think with a customer advisory board, just be human, like show up as you are and don't overthink little things. One thing that happened with a customer advisory board at Intro Hive, I remember we were trying to think of ways that we could communicate with our members. And we started thinking, okay, a LinkedIn group, or maybe it's a Slack
Hmm.
channel, or maybe it's a formalized platform. And I was like, let's just ask our members, how do they like to be communicated with? And it seems like something you should know or something that you want to assume. But they were like, if you could just email us, like that's where we live every day.
Hmm.
So an email is just fine. And so sometimes simple is best. So
Well, and I would say all the time, it's
yeah.
best to just ask your audience when in doubt, just ask.
Yeah.
You'll 9 times out of 10 get the answer that you're looking for, which is why we
Totally.
focus so much on the research element in the work
Yes.
that we do. Um, okay, I like those practical tips. Let's talk about measurement. Um,
Our favorite topic as customer marketing.
our everyone's favorite topic in the world of customer marketing and advocacy is measurement.
Yeah.
Some things are easier to measure than others. So let's get into it. Let's talk about how to measure the impact and success of a cab, and also keeping an eye on how to possibly measure and ensure long-term value. Because when we think of cabs, like, are we thinking of cabs in the same way? Is a cab like a point in time event? Is it a series of events that are connected? Just
Yes.
fill that in for me before we talk about measurement.
Sure. Before we talk about measurements, so great question again. There's a stickiness and a longevity, obviously, to a customer
Mm,
advisory board. And yes, it is about the events for sure, but it's also about the moments between those events that I think are most important, to be completely honest. It's how do you keep the conversation going and how do you keep your members engaged with not just yourself, but each other?
mm, mm-hmm.
But I really like your nod there to connecting it maybe to something bigger. So one thing we did at IntroHive, which I think worked really, really well for us, is we had an annual summit. So a lot of our customers were either in North America or they were in the UK. And so we launched the customer advisory board, but we actually had two cohorts. We had one in North America and one in UK. As well, we had a client summit in North America and UK. And so
Mm,
what we did is we attached those meetings, those in-person meetings, to the in-person client event, which was like double the impact, right? They get the intimacy and exclusivity of being a part of that CAB meeting, but then they get that full breadth of networking with even more peers at the big event. And so it's a really nice draw to attach it to something bigger than the meeting itself. And then, of course, there's virtual touch-ins because people are often across countries, across the ocean sometimes. And so you do want to make sure that you're still checking in from a virtual standpoint, but you also want to make sure that you're making it interactive and fresh
mm-hmm.
throughout those points. So good.
Okay, cool. So measurement, how are you showing, how are you you're gonna do a cab, how are you gonna get funding the next year to do an even bigger and better cab? How are you gonna measure and report the value?
Yeah. Okay, so for measurement, so things that I considered, and I know that measurement is one of those things that as customer marketing and advocacy professionals, we sometimes have a hard time nailing down very well. But with a customer advisory board, there's definitely a few things that you can focus on. One being the stickiness of your customer advisory board. So, it's a big ask.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So
Tell
you
me
have,
more.
yeah. Great. I love that you're leaning in.
Yeah, I
Um,
am.
so for your customer advisory board, you're asking members to be a part of something for about 12 to 18 months, which is a chunk of time.
Yeah.
One thing I was really, really proud of was by the time we got to the second year of our customer advisory board meetings, we checked in with everybody and everybody wanted to stay. Everybody wanted to stay on. And so I think the stickiness of a customer advisory board is really a great indicator that it's working, it's jiving. I also think the attraction of others wanting to be on the customer advisory
Hmm.
board is also really interesting. And I think very telling for the work that you're doing. I also believe that within the members, these are obviously typically raving, champions and advocates. But tracking advocacy activities that they have participated in within their term on the customer advisory board is a great way to directly kind of correlate their impact and what those advocacy activities during their term then kind of impacted internally, whether it was reference calls or testimonials or joining a webinar and chatting about their story, trying to influence other customers for upsell or cross sell or prospective clients is a big one. And then within your members that have joined and the organizations that have joined, understanding, are we retaining those customers? Are we growing within that customer base that are a part of the customer advisory board? Are we upselling and cross-selling? And then another really interesting one that I think is really important is what ideas and features have we taken out of those meetings and now implemented? What impact has that had? I remember after our first customer advisory board meeting, they literally leadership 2 weeks later called a meeting in Chicago for everyone to fly in and get together because of the rich gold nuggets that they had heard in the customer advisory board meeting. They knew that they had to rethink some messaging maybe and rethink a couple things that they were trying to figure out in real time. So those are a couple things that I definitely kind of try to put markers on when I'm speaking to leadership around the success of a customer advisory board and the impact that it can have.
Super, super interesting. And yeah, just looking at the total value of the people who are in that room and who you can attract to attend the events over the course of the 12 to 18 months. You've got to be doing something right if people come back to your party, right?
Yeah.
If you have
right?
a party and then no one comes to your next one, then maybe you blew it.
That's
I love this. I love this topic, customer advisory boards, but even if we kind of level that up, the topic of executive engagement, it's been around since the beginning of customer advocacy time, thinking about how to interact with executives through reference motions and them playing hard to get for our scaled advocacy type of programming that has been prevalent for a number of years, but really thinking about executive advocacy as a remit and a customer advisory board as one of your channels, one of your tools in your executive engagement toolkit. It's so interesting, and I think it's so ripe for new best practice, for new thought leadership in that arena. When we were in San Francisco last week, we were having a chat with one of our longtime peers and clients, and he was, talking about his new remit with executive advocacy, and it's just, it's such an interesting arena for good high touch plays, for some life cycle advocacy plays, and we can never downplay the importance of executives and the role that they play in the whole portfolio of customer advocacy programs. Those high touch folks, closer to the or at the top of that customer advocacy kind of pyramid. So thank you for coming in to talk advocacy to me. Liz left and didn't come back.
That's okay.
That's all good. It's all good. It's all good. This was a great conversation. I'd like to have more conversations around executive advocacy on Talk Advocacy to Me. So if any of our listeners out there have experience in this topic and would like to join us, then please hit us up and let us know. It's really an area, as I said, I think ripe for innovation. We don't have to do cabs the way we've always done cabs. Is there a new and better way to engage executives?
And that's what I've learned, is that CAB is an overarching term that many people do differently within their organization.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. Your last point there is really interesting, because I think a CAB can really help an organization multi-thread within a customer base. And it's often really hard to engage those executives because they are time poor. They are getting their attention taken in 1,000 directions. And so to your point, I think companies all the time are struggling to multi-thread within their customer base. And so this program alone, I think would certainly help those looking to do so. And, I just have two little takeaways.
Oh yeah.
So one being, if I were to give any kind of advice or takeaway on customer advisory boards, I would say, trust your gut. And if you doubt it, don't do it. Whether that's like the customer advisory board or there's like an activity or something like that. And stand up. Trust your gut is more back to my story around going back to leadership and saying, I'm not sure if we're ready right now.
Yeah.
That was one thing. And then the other thing is, I like to always inject every customer program with the golden rule. Do unto others as you would like done unto you. And just at the end of the day, people are human. People want to be treated with respect and consideration. And as long as your board and the way you manage your board is first kind of that ethos, I think that's really important. And just be mindful and intentional. And that's all you can ask for.
Great answer. We actually, a question has come in, and I think we have just a couple minutes here. So,
Sure.
do you want to answer it live?
Sure.
Okay. This is from Jennifer Lyons. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching the live cast. Jennifer has asked, if you join a new startup organization whose private equity team hoped to launch a new cab within a single quarter, what would you tell them? What would you do?
Oh, I have so many sub questions for you. I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that are you doing it to do, or are you doing it just because? Like
Mm,
just because, or with true intent? And I would say that if a private equity or like your board is pushing for this, I would hope that your senior leadership are also kind of aligned. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've mentioned is that, if a board wants it to be done and a senior leadership are aligned and executives are aligned, you should be able to pull it off with some thought and consideration. But that's a short amount of time to turn that around. But the alignment is key, and it'll give you great foundation for a great board. And I would say, as mentioned in today's talk, customer advisory boards can be really scary and really daunting. And sometimes you just need to start. So start anywhere. One thing I will
mm,
say, actually, not to draw on, but with our first customer advisory board, as mentioned, we had one in North America and we had one in the UK. The one in North America, we started with about 8 participants. So a customer advisory board typically has like 8 to 12 participants. And in the UK, we had 6. And, we had this, we're kind of like aiming for 8. And I was like, that's okay. We like 6 is fantastic. 6 is a great start. So look
mm-hmm.
at things through an opportune lens rather than being like, oh, that's not exactly where we want to be in order to start. You are not
Yeah.
always going to have all the things in place to start, but just starting is
Yeah.
sometimes the answer.
I agree with that. Just kind of take the steps that you can. And Jennifer, if I can add to that answer to your question, if it is being pushed by the board and you have your leadership's buy-in, as Elizabeth said, then hopefully that frees up the time and the budget to focus on the cab as one of your first big lifts. I think you can accomplish a lot in 90 days if it is in that first quarter. But also knowing that when you join a new organization, you also need time just to get your feet planted and really understand who your customers are to be able to plan out a cab. So maybe there's a negotiation here where you can meet them halfway, where maybe you get kind of like the strategy in place in that first quarter and then begin to execute in the quarter after. And whenever I'm up against kind of what might seem like a tense timeline, I just ask why. Like, what is pushing this? What is this anchored to something that's really important to the business that is immovable? Then that kind of starts to put some parameters around how much movement you might have in terms of the timeline. One last question here as we are at the bottom of the hour. Another one from Jennifer. Thank you so much, Jennifer. What's the best practice for how many times per year a cab meets? I can jump right in with that one. The strategies that we have done, I would say it's usually 4. And we, like what I typically see, even like pre-Captivate, like 2 in person, 2 virtual types of meetings, that sort of cadence over the course of a year. So once a quarter. Elizabeth, what do you think? How many times per year should a cab meet according to best practice and according to your experience?
Yeah, I would agree, Deena. I think you're definitely spot on with your recommendation there. With us, it was a little challenging because we had the 2 cohorts.
Mm,
So, we couldn't get each one meeting twice per year in person. So what we did was we did 1 cab in the spring and 1 cab in the fall,
mm,
connected to our client events in both regions.
yeah,
But to your point, it's having those virtual check-ins
yeah,
a few times a year. So making sure that
yes.
you don't go, I would say, like 2 months without some kind of interaction, or 3 months, 2 to 3 months
Mm-hmm.
without some kind of meeting, intentional kind of get together with your members.
Yeah, and always taking it back to your strategy. What is the purpose? What's the purpose for your business? What's the purpose for your customers? And then what sort of timeline meetings and modes of meetings, virtual, in person, otherwise, helps you to reach those goals or to answer back to your strategy. This was so fun, Elizabeth. It's so fun having someone from Captivate internal join us here on Talk Advocacy to Me. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and talking about all things cabs. It is, like I said, just such a topic that is just ripe for innovation. So who knows, maybe 2025 is the year that we see some new innovation in the arena of cabs. Love it. Great topic.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, everyone. Bye.
Take care.